How to compute the performance ratings.
Welcome to the Learning and Development channel, where you can learn, lead, and make a difference.
How to compute the performance ratings. In the computation of the performance ratings, Part 1 to Part 3 of the IPCRF rating form shall be needed to be accomplished. Let us begin with the Part 1 individual performance IPC rating. So here are the steps. For part 1, column I to N shall be filled only during phase 3 or the performance review and evaluation of the RPMS cycle. Step 1, evaluate all actual results vis-a-vis the standard set in performance measures, quality, efficiency, and timeliness. For example, the actual results under the KRA1 Objective 1 of Mr. De La Cruz is responded 85 to 99% or 25 out of 30 receive reservation queries with 5 pending queries in 15 minutes to 8 hours after call, text, message, emails, or any other forms of correspondences. It is important to note that the actual results may also be based on your set performance target. As you can see here under column F to column E. So the indicators are being served as the performance rating guide in assessing the individual actual results. So it says here that Mr. De La Cruz responded 85 to 99% or 25 out of 30 received reservation queries. So that means his rating under the quality performance measure is 4. Uh, he falls under the 4 uh, performance rating with indicator that um, for every reservation queries that receive and responded, out of which is 85 to 99% only. So under the efficiency performance measure, his rating is with 3 because based on the actual results, he has 5 pending queries. In the 3 rating, the indicator is 4 to 6 pending queries. In his case, he has 5 pending queries. For timeliness, his rating is 4. It's because, uh, as stated in Mr. De La Cruz actual results, in 15 minutes to 8 hours after call, text message, emails, or any other forms of correspondences. So after evaluating the performance measures under quality, efficiency, and timeliness, let's proceed to the next step. So compute the average of the QET based on the individual ratings under a certain objective or competencies. For example, the average of the 4.000 under quality, 3.00 under efficiency, and 4.00 under timeliness is 3.667. It's also important to note that the rating for QET should be a whole number, while for the average and scores, at, at the same time, here, the performance rating, there should be at least until 3 decimal points only. So after the computation of the average of QET, let us proceed on step 3. Determine the score by multiplying the average QET in weight allocation. For example, The average for the Tier A1 Objective 1 is 3.667 and the grade weight allocation is 15%. So multiply the 3.667, which is the average score, to the assigned weight or the 15%. So 3.667 times 0.015, that would be 0.550. You could also use the Excel formula and then drag it down to get the real-time scores in average under column M and column N. So after getting the scores under each objective, add all the scores of objectives to get the total score under part 1. So example, so once you are done in getting the scores of the objectives, of the score per objective under each KRA, you may use the Excel formula equal sum and highlighting those scores under column M to get the total score under part 1. So under part 1, Mr. De La Cruz got 3.667. So based on the RPMS rating scale on the right bottom of the part on IPCRF, 3.667 falls on VS. So under part 1, Mr. De La Cruz got a 3.667 or VS performance rating cycle. But this rating is not final yet, considering that we have also part 2 and part 3 that needs to be accomplished. So the next step, once determining the final score for this part, is the ratee and rater shall reach an agreement on performance rating. Upon reaching an agreement, both the ratee and the rater shall sign the performance rating. So, for step 7, submit the signed IPCR rating to the personal division at each level, which will be attached to the individual person's 2015. This is pursuant to Rule 7A, Section 58 of DO2 Series of 2015. So, as you can see here on the bottom section, we have the ratee, rater, and approving authority that needs to be signed to be submitted to the personal division at each governance level. So we are now done in the part 1. We will be proceeding on the part 2. So the part 2 is the individual composite competencies. This shall be filled only during phase 3 of the RPMS cycle. This is comprised of the core behavioral competencies and core skill. There are 6 core behavioral competencies such as self-management, professionalism and ethics, result focus, teamwork, service orientation, and innovation. While under the core skills, we have 3, such as achievement, managing diversity, and accountability. So let us begin with the steps in evaluating and computing the competencies rating. Step 1, evaluate all demonstrated competencies and skills vis-a-vis the standard set in part 2. Considering that the part 2 has a fixed standard performance or rather competencies that an individual must demonstrate within the performance rating period, the ratee and rater shall evaluate the competencies obtained by the individual within the rating period. So for example, under Self-management, the rating is 4, while under self-management, the rating is 5. Professionalism and ethics is 4. Um, Teamwork 4. Service orientation 5. And 4 for result focus. While under core skills, the ratings obtained are 5 among all core skills. So after evaluation, all demonstrated competencies and skills at the score of the core behavioral competencies. So how to add the score? After adding the scores of core behavioral competencies, which is 5444, which is equals to 25. And then for core skills, we have a rating of 3.5. So compute the average score of the behavioral competencies and then divide it by 6. So once you get the score under core behavioral competencies divided by 6 in order to get the 4.167 rating under this um, section. So let us do the same on what we did in the core behavioral competencies. First, the first procedure is to add the score of the core skills and then compute the average of the core skills and then divide it by 2. Here is the sample. So the Mr. De La Cruz got a perfect score under the core skills. He obtained a 15. So divide it by 3 in order to obtain the core skills rating. So the rating under this one is 5.000. After which, let's proceed on to step 6. Get the sum of the average score of core behavioral competencies and core skills. Step 7, divide the total average score to 2 to get the overall rating. So for example, we just need to add the 4.167 plus 5.000, which is equals to 9.167 to get the sum of these two. So after which, divide the total average score to 2 to get the overall rating. 9.167 divided by 2 equals to 4.583. Once you obtain the overall rating under part, we will now proceed on part 3. But before that, do not forget in assessing or evaluating the competencies and skills, the rating scale would be 5 role model, 4 consistently, demonstrate 3, most of the time demonstrates 2, sometimes demonstrate, and 1 rarely demonstrate. In evaluating these core competencies and skills, the whole number shall be used, while in getting the, the ratings for the core behavioral competencies, core skills, and overall rating, the 3 decimal points shall be used. We are now done in part 2. So we will be proceeding on the part 3 of the IPCRF. Part 3 is the summary of ratings, which it is the combination of getting the average of the part 1 and part 2 ratings. So step 1, gather the part 1 and part 2 scores to get the sum of mean scores of part 1 and part 2. For example, once you have gathered the scores under part 1 and part 2, you get the sum of this the scores from part 1 and part 2. So 3.667 plus 4.583 is equals to 8.250. So after you're getting the sum of the two parts, the next step is to compute the final performance result by dividing the sum of part 1 and part 2 scored to 2. Let us find out what will be the performance result. So the performance result is, so 8.250 divided by 2 is equals to 4.125. So this is the final performance result. So in determining the objective rating of the obtained final performance result, use the RPMS rating scale. So you can see it under the bottom section of part 1. So again, Mr. De La Cruz got a 4.125. Let's take a look on the RPMS ratings table. So you can enter or write down the final performance rating under the column H. So the performance rating scale, again, this can be C under the bottom section of the part 1. So for 4.125, it falls under very satisfactory. 3.500 to 4.4999. So the next step, the ratee and rater shall reach an agreement on the performance rating. Upon reaching an agreement, again, both the ratee and rater shall sign the performance rating and submit the signed IPCR rating to the personnel division at each level, which will be attached to the individual personnel store on file according to Rule 7A, Section 58 of DO2 Series of 2015. So that ends my presentation. Hope you learn a lot from this video. And thank you for listening. For more information or clarification, you may reach us through bhrod.hrdd@deped.gov.ph. Thank you.
Like and subscribe to the L&D channel on YouTube using the link youtube.com/@learn2lead channel.